Hey, buddy. It's for Mama, okay? Just you know.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be doing my own birth story, which I'm super excited. I wouldn't say my own, I mean obviously it's mine. Really excited to be doing this video because I've been meaning to sit down and record this for 4 years now. I've been wanting to start my channel for 4 years and I never did because I was too shy or too scared. And so I'm really happy that I'm finally sitting down and doing this today. When I was pregnant, I loved watching weekly updates and I watched every birth story that I could possibly find. And I really wanted to do that for my own so that I can look back and remember it, and you forget really quickly. So I'm doing it 3 years later, but I hope that it's still better than never doing it at all. So let's get started. Okay. So before we start, I just wanted to say, Eesa, if you're watching this one day, I want you to know that I love you with all my heart, and you and your brother and your Baba are the best things that have ever happened to me, and I would do everything again in a heartbeat. Maybe it's best if you don't watch it. Okay, so my birth story actually starts when I was 39 weeks pregnant. The day that I turned 39 weeks pregnant was a Friday, and on that Friday I had my, what you would call the bloody show and the mucus plug. I'd read online that normally when that happens you go into labor pretty quickly. So I was expecting to go into labor over the weekend. My husband was actually on vacation until Monday, which was a holiday for us, and then he was going back to work on Tuesday. So we really joked that the baby should come before Tuesday, but that knowing us, the baby would probably come on Tuesday morning. The plan was to have the baby completely naturally at the birthing center, so no epidural, no nothing. Just felt like, you know what, I can do it. I'll be okay. I did not go into labor that weekend. Tuesday morning, my husband woke up earlier than me and he left for work. I woke up at 10 a.m. to my water breaking. I heard the pop and there was this huge gush, and I ran to the bathroom and I leaked a bunch of water. And so I was like, okay, my water broke. And so I called my husband. I'm like, hey, this happened. I'm gonna call my midwife now and we'll see what happens. So I wasn't feeling anything. I wasn't having contractions. I didn't feel like I was in labor at all. So I called my midwife and I was like, hey, I think my water broke. My primary midwife went on vacation when it was time for me to go into labor. So I didn't have her around. I had her backup, who I had met once or twice. But I had her, so I called her, but she was busy. So she told me to come in and that another midwife would be doing the test to see whether it was my water that broke or not. So I got dressed, I went in, and then the other midwife, who I had never met before, asked me if I wanted to do the test myself, which was like kind of like a swab that you take up there, or whether I wanted her to do it. So I decided, because I had never met her before, that I would do it myself. So I went, I did the test, I brought it back, and they said, look, it's not your water that broke. So I was a little bit confused and I wasn't sure. I mean, I'm a first time mom, so a lot of times they tell you like, maybe you just peed yourself. And I didn't feel like that's what happened. I knew what that felt like, and I knew that that wasn't what I felt like. I just thought like, okay, maybe she's right. Maybe I did just pee myself. I just need to move on with my day. So I actually had plans with a friend. So I went to go see my friend who had also given birth the year before with a midwife. So I let her know, I'm like, hey, this happened this morning and I'm pretty sure I'm still leaking water. So she said, she's like, listen, midwives really trust a mother's instincts more than anything. So if you tell them that you feel like it was your water that broke, I'm pretty sure they'll believe you. So I was like, okay, you know what? I called my husband. I'm like, hey, this is what happened. This is what they said. This is what I feel. And he's like, you know what? You gotta just trust what you feel, but give it some time. So wait a few hours throughout the day and then call her back. So I'm like, okay, cool. That's good advice. So I waited and I kept leaking water. Like every half an hour to 45 minutes, I would have like a gush of water, but it wasn't enough to be like, whoa, there's water everywhere. But it was enough to completely soak my pants. I went home and I waited for my husband to come home, and I was like, this is still how I'm feeling. So I called my midwife and I was like, hey, I know that I came in and I did the test, but I'm still feeling my water come out of it and I'm not really sure what's going on. And she was like, listen, we did the test and it came out negative. It's done. I'm like, you're fine. She was a little bit abrupt with me and I didn't really like how she was speaking to me. So I was kind of like, okay, you know what? I'm not going to bother with it. I'm just going to move on with my life. Maybe I'm being too paranoid. So I went to sleep. Wednesday morning, my midwife called me and said, "Hey, I'm really sorry about yesterday. She had like 6 babies that she was giving birth to, like back to back to back, and she was just super exhausted." So I was like, I understand. I accepted her apology, but I still felt kind of like I don't really want to bother her at this point. A bunch of research as to like how safe it is to stay. If your water does break, then how much are you risking an infection or things like that. Most women go into labor within 36 hours. It was like 75% of women who go into labor within 36 hours, and like 95% go into labor within 48 hours. And it had already been like 24 hours, so I wasn't that concerned. I felt like, you know what, if things are meant to happen, then I'll go into labor naturally anyways. I went about my day on Wednesday. I think I went like out, I ran errands, I cleaned my house, and that night I told my husband, I'm like, I'm still leaking water and I'm getting concerned now. Babies are supposed to need water to live, right? Or if I'm leaking the water, then is my baby okay? And I'm not really sure what to do. And he was like, you should probably go back and tell them what's going on. So that night I was sleeping and I woke up around like 3 a.m. to another huge gush of water. And so at that point I got really concerned. I still didn't feel any contractions, but I was leaking more and more water. So my husband at that point was like, you need to call your midwife. And I was like, okay, but I'm not going to call in the middle of the night because I already felt like I bothered her. So I decided, okay, I'm going to call in the morning. So I went back to sleep. I still kept having a little bit of water come out, and I was really worried. So I called first thing in the morning, and she said, that sounds like your water breaking, so come in. So I'm like, okay. So I went in, and I didn't even tell my husband that I was going in at that time. I didn't even let him know I was going to the birthing center or anything, because I just felt like I didn't really know what would happen. So I went in, and my midwife did the test for my water breaking. She went to get the results, and she was like, it's positive, and it is your water. So I was like, okay, I don't really know what that means now. I'm not in labor. So midwives have a 36-hour span between which they can wait from when they find out that your water is breaking to when they need to transfer you to the hospital, because it's not safe for you to be laboring with them anymore. Midwives essentially don't deal with you as soon as you're out of the realm of a perfectly normal, healthy pregnancy and perfectly normal, healthy labor. So 36 hours is the span where you're out of that, and then you need to go to the hospital. They transfer you to an OB and they deal with it from there. So I had already known that my water had broken like 2 days before that, but I was like, okay, I'll still wait the time and I'll see, because now she's monitoring me, she's monitoring the baby, she's making sure that everything's okay. So what she told me, she's like, go home for now. It's around noon at this point. She's saying, go home, come back at 8 o'clock. So come back at 8 o'clock. If you haven't gone into labor by then we're going to try and speed things up and get things done. So I was like, okay. So I called my husband. I'm like, hey, my water did break. And he's like, okay, I'm leaving work right now. I'm like, you know what? I'll come pick you up, because I have the car and you didn't have a car. So I'm like, it's going to take you too long and I want you to be with me. Drove from the birthing center to his job, which is about like half an hour away from there. And I picked him up. I brought him home and we got like pizza and we were hungry. We were like, okay, we're gonna rest. We're gonna pack our bags. Most of my stuff was already packed, because I thought I was in labor at like 34 weeks and I did have preterm labor, and it was just a first time mom. So I had everything packed and ready to go. It wasn't an issue. My house was clean. I was so excited and ready for this baby to come. I went to sleep. I took a nap. My husband took a nap, but I was so excited that I just couldn't nap for a long time. So he was napping. I woke up and I think I vacuumed and I ate my pizza and just got everything together, ready to go. And then around like 7-ish, we left for the birthing center, and we got there and she said, okay, I want you to go through this thing where you're going to pump, use castor oil on your belly, and you're going to take this homeopathy, and then you do a combination of all three, and you keep doing it as long as you're getting contractions to try and boost your contractions into labor. We started this around 9 o'clock and we did it for an hour, and I started getting contractions. They weren't too intense, they weren't too serious, but they were definitely contractions. So she said that if you start getting contractions, then keep doing it for another hour or another 2 hours. So we kept doing it, and my husband helped me through all of it. He got all my pumping stuff. He passed me everything. He rubbed the castor oil on my belly for me. He did everything for me. But I was just really tired already at that point, before all this even started, just because of the stress of having to worry about everything for the 3 days before that. So it was around midnight that we stopped all of this, and I wasn't going into labor. I felt like, they were just going to have to induce me because there's no other choice. I'm not in labor, but my baby's losing water. I went to sleep around 1 a.m., and my midwife had told me to call her first thing in the morning when I woke up. And I woke up around like 8 a.m. to my midwife calling me. And my midwife was like, hey, what's going on? 4 o'clock that day on the Friday was when she would have to transfer me based on when my water had broken. So she calls me and she says, hey, what happened? And I said, I did the things, but it didn't work and I'm still not in labor. So she said, okay, I need you to come in like right now this morning and we're going to try some other things. I'm like, okay, I'm really tired. But anyways, she got showered and I got ready, got all my stuff, and I went back. My husband came with me this time, and I went to the birthing center, and she told me, okay, listen, like, you don't have a lot of time left, so what we're going to try to do is fully break your water, because apparently there's like different types of breaking of the water. So she said, we're going to fully rupture it, we're going to do a membrane sweep, and I want you to drink castor oil. She called at 8 a.m. She told me to drink some castor oil, like mix it with like orange juice and this kind of stuff. And I was like, I tried like one sip of it and I was like, heck no, I'm not doing this. This is disgusting. So I didn't do it. And so she asked me, did you take it? And I was like, no, I didn't. So she's like, oh, okay, well, I'm going to need you to take that. So I was like, okay, we'll see. So she broke my water and it was like huge. I was like, okay, I thought my water broke before, but this was just like, I was like pouring out water. It was impressive how much water you have. She did the sweep, which was not painful for me. I know I've heard that a lot of women say that it's really painful. She also checked me at that point and she said, already 2 centimeters dilated. I was 100% effaced. And she said the baby's head was at a -1 station, which basically means the baby's head was in the birth canal and like right there, ready to come out. So I was like, she actually made the comment, she said, it's been a long time that I felt a baby this low from a woman who's not in labor. I was actually pretty excited, like, great, this is a good start. Hopefully when I go into labor, things will go a little bit quickly. But I was wrong. So those things, and she sent me home, and she said, okay, you need to call me if like anything happens, and otherwise around like 2 or 3 o'clock, we're going to make the call, and we're going to have to bring you into the hospital. She's like, I'll come with you, and, we'll get you transferred to an OB. I got home around 11. I laid down for a bit because I was still feeling really tired, and then around noon, my husband was showering, and I got my first contraction right at noon, and it hit hard. It was a little bit jarring because it went from being totally fine to a very rough contraction. And then 2 minutes later, I had another contraction. 3 minutes later, I had another contraction. And that actually continued until 1 o'clock. So that whole time, between 12 and 1, I was having contractions every 2 to 3 minutes. They were lasting between 30 seconds to 1 minute. And they were pretty intense. So I was kind of surprised, but also really happy because I was waiting to go into labor. So I was like, yay, finally, I'm in labor. It worked. I called my midwife around 1 o'clock and I'm like, hey, I'm having contractions. She's like, hey, great. Did you take a bath? I was like, no, I took a shower because I had read online that baths weren't the best thing to do when your water was broken. She's like, you know what? It's okay. Take a bath at home. And then I had like 3 contractions while I was on the phone with her. So she tells me like, I think you should come in. So I'm like, okay, cool, whatever. Got to the birthing center. It was probably around like 2:15. They got me set up in a room. Everything was fun. I was actually feeling pretty good at that point. My midwife was busy again. I think she was with another baby. Other midwives came in who I had never met before, and they were the ones who were like, are you okay? And they were checking on me and checking on the baby, and everything was good to go. And it was like, okay, you're in labor. So I was doing different things. I was bouncing on my ball. I was sitting on the bed. I was having my husband massage my back. I was going in the bathroom. The one thing I didn't do is take a bath because I'm just not a water person and I didn't want to have to take a bath. I also have pretty severe eczema, so every time I get in the water, when I get out, I have to put my cream on, and it's a whole thing. So I decided, you know what, I'm not going to take a bath. It was around 4:30 at that point, and I felt like, you know what, this is going well. One midwife came in and she was like, oh, maybe you should try lying down on your back because you seem like you're pretty far along and maybe it'll help speed things along. So I tried lying down on my back. It was terrible on my back. So I was like, okay, I don't really want to do that. Around 5 o'clock, a midwife comes in who I've never met before, and she goes, do you want to do a check? And I said, no, I don't want to do a check because I found that the checks aren't really indicative of how far along you actually are in your labor, because sometimes you hear a number, you hear like, oh, I'm at a 4, but then like you go to a 10 in like an hour, and vice versa. Sometimes you're at an 8, but you could be at an 8 for like 4 hours. So I just felt like it would throw me off, and it wouldn't make me feel better or worse, and it might give me false hope, or it might make me feel really sad, and so I just didn't want to do it. So I was like, no thank you, I do not want to do a check. And then she leaves. And then she comes back maybe like 15, 20 minutes later, and she's like, you know what? I think something's wrong and we should do a check. And I was like, okay, what do you mean something's wrong? But I'm like, whatever, let's do a check. So I laid down, and like I said, it was really rough for me to lay down. I found it really painful. I was still having contractions every 2 to 3 minutes. I laid down on my back, and she started doing a check, and she started getting really far in there, and it started to be really painful. I started having a contraction in the middle of her doing a check. Midwives rarely ever do a check while you're having a contraction because it's really painful. They'll normally wait in between your contractions to be able to check you. So I started having a contraction, and I was like, ow, ow, I'm in pain, get out of me. And she wouldn't get out of me. And I kept asking her to remove herself from me, and she wouldn't. And until my husband literally took her hand and removed it from me, she did not take her hands out of me, and I was really upset. And I started bleeding a lot like crazy, and she was like, yeah, you're only at like a 4. So I was like, great. That was pretty much the worst experience, because not only did she cause me pain, I'm now bleeding, and she's like, you're only at a 4. And I was like, wow, that's actually terrible, because it's been like 6 hours almost at this point of me having contractions every 2 to 3 minutes, and I'm still only at a 4. And I started at a 2, so that means I've gone 2 centimeters in 6 hours, which is really bad even for a first-time mom. She could tell I was upset, and I was not happy with her, so she went out and she got my backup midwife, who came in. I was obviously upset, and I was like, okay, what's going on? And she's like, you know, you're not progressing the way that you should. You know, the baby's fine and everything's good, but you're just not progressing. Like, well, we're gonna try different things to try and maybe relax you a bit. Like, maybe it's because you're stressed out. I'm like, what if that doesn't work? What if whatever you're gonna do doesn't work and I still don't progress? What happens? And she's like, and then we take you to the hospital. She's like, at that point, sometimes we suggest getting an epidural, because the epidural can just relax you and help you progress. I'm never opposed to getting an epidural. It's just that midwives don't administer epidurals, and I wanted to go with a midwife. I really enjoyed my experience prior to that with a midwife. So she was with me from that point on, actually. She had me take a bath. It actually made my contractions a little bit further apart, but what it did do is, at the same time, it made my contractions a lot more painful. Like, I felt like my pelvis was literally breaking apart. I started to get to the point where I like, this is really tough. And I was telling my husband, like, I don't know how much longer I can do this. So he was like, you know, you got this, keep going. So I had dinner. They got me this lasagna, which was actually really, really good. I continued to stay in the bath. I got out of the bath. My husband and my midwife would massage me at like the same time, and it actually felt really good. It's like every hour she would do a check, and I would get to like half a centimeter more or so. So by like 9 p.m., I was done. I was like, you know what? It's been 9 hours at this point. My midwife had checked me, and I was at like a 5. So I'm like, and my husband was like, no, you can do it. He knew what I wanted, and what I wanted was to give birth at the birthing center. And him and my midwife were both like, how about we do this for another like hour? And then if in an hour you still feel the same way, we'll get you transferred to the hospital. So I'm like, okay, fine, I can do an hour. An hour later, I was still in so much pain, and it was just getting worse, the pain. I was getting more tired. It was getting to the point where I was actually passing out in between contractions. I would have a contraction, and then I would fall asleep, and then 3 minutes later wake up screaming in pain because it was just so rough. So I was like, you know what, I'm done. I need to go to the hospital. She started the process of getting me there, but it actually took a long time, because the first thing she did was call my original midwife, and it was like, hey, can you take her in? So she did that, and my original midwife was like, yeah, sure, I'll come in. Trying to get me to the hospital that the midwives are affiliated with, but they were full, and that's actually the hospital that I wanted to go to, because she came in and she was like, okay, we're going to take you to this other hospital, which I really didn't want to go to, but it's actually the hospital that I was born at. Around like 11:30, so I've gone through another like hour and a half at that point of that. And she's like, okay, so we've called an ambulance, and we're going to get you transferred. The ambulance, for some reason, comes from super far away, even though the hospital is like a 3-minute drive from where I am. So I'm like freaking out my husband at this point. I'm just like, you know what? I can walk there. Like, let's just go. Our car is here. I can just walk there, which you can't do. It's not legal for you to do that. So eventually they came. It was probably around like 12:30 or 1 o'clock by the time they actually got there. Just like yelling in pain. I wasn't even trying to feel any better. I wasn't trying to manage my pain at that point. I was done. I was exhausted. It had been, at that point, 12 hours of being in labor. We got to the hospital around like 2 a.m. or 3 a.m. By the time they got me checked in and they got everything done, they put an IV in me, they gave me antibiotics before they were going to let me have an epidural. So finally around like 5 a.m., they were like, okay, you can have an epidural, we're going to get the anesthesiologist. By the time all that was done, I was still having contractions in the middle of this. I was throwing up at this point. Threw up so many times. Finally got the epidural. It was around 6 a.m. So I literally went through 17 hours or so before I got the epidural. Labored naturally, which is rough. Stopped feeling everything. All the pain. Just completely gone within like 10 minutes. It was amazing. Checked me around like 7 or 7:30 and I was at an 8. So we're like, fantastic. This is working. This is going to go great. So my midwife was like, okay, I want you to get some rest because you're going to have to wake up and you're going to have to push. So you need sleep. So I was like, yes, good idea. So she set up a bed for my husband. She was like, I'm not allowed to stay here, but I'm going to be like 2 minutes away. So as soon as you start getting close to pushing, you call me. She actually told everyone on the floor, she told all the nurses, she told my husband, she's like, as soon as she gets close, you call me. I got some sleep. I slept for maybe like an hour and a half or so. I woke up around like 8:30. And I went on my phone and I messaged like my friends and my family. She checked me again. I think I was at like a 9 or so, or like an 8.5. Okay, she's like, you know what? I think we're going to start you on some Pitocin. Which, looking back, I have no idea why we did that because I was already at like an 8.5. I didn't need to be further induced. But the doctor is doing a C-section right now. But when she's done, then I'm gonna get the approval to put Pitocin, and then we're gonna start you on that. So I'm like, okay, whatever. Honestly, it's been 20 plus hours at this point, and I just want to be done. And everything was going well. We could hear his heartbeat. Everything was good. And then all of a sudden, I remember being on the phone with my mom at 10, like 15 or so. I would call my mom, and I was talking to her, and I'm like, hey, yeah, like, I'm going to be home later today because when you're with a midwife, you give birth at the hospital, and then you stay at the hospital for a few hours afterwards, and then you go home. You're allowed to go home. You're allowed to leave from there. So I was like, I'm going to be home later. Can you like make this food that I want and then bring it over? I really wanted meatballs. So I was like, can you make me meatballs and then bring it over so that I can have it for lunch today? Because it's like 10 a.m. I'm like going to have this baby in like an hour. So we're good. So she's on the phone with me. I'm like, okay, mom, she's coming in and she can do something. So I got to go. So I hung up on her and it was like 10:27 when I hung up on her. And then the nurse comes in. Before they put in the Pitocin, they did a check on me. And they were like, oh, you're like a 9.5, so we're going to call the doctor in. We're going to tell her to come and you can start pushing, basically. So I was like, okay, fantastic. That's great. Let's do it. And she's like, okay, great. I got permission to start you on Pitocin. I'm going to start you on Pitocin. So I'm like, okay, cool. Let's do it. So she puts the thing in, and literally like 1 minute later, like while she's still there, my son's heartbeat completely drops. It drops to 0. Like it doesn't even drop to like 30 or 40 or like 50 or 60. An average heartbeat for a baby is like 120 to 140. It's like probably the scariest moment of the entire labor. So both me and my husband looking at each other were just like, what's wrong? And she was just like, and the doctor walks in kind of pretty much at the same time. It was all really dramatic. So the doctor walks in supposedly to come in and see if I can start pushing, but instead she comes in and she was like, okay, what's going on? And she checks me right away and she's just like, okay, I'm sorry, but we really have to do a C-section. And I was like, wait, what? How did this happen? And she checks me and she's like, she's only like a 8.5 or something like that, so she can't push. And like the baby's heartbeat is started going back up, but it just wasn't good, and she had heard it flatline, so she was just like, no, that's it, we're doing C-section. And I was kind of like, whoa, what's going on? And I was really scared, and I didn't know what to do or what to say or left. Like they wheeled me out, and my husband was there, and I'm actually going to get him to come in now. Baby can't sit there. Like this.
Why are we sitting so close to each other?
Don't want to sit close to me. So Welcome to my channel.
Yes.
This is your big debut. So this is my husband Fahad, the point where his heartbeat had completely flatlined and they told us, okay, you need to do a C-section, and they wheeled me out of there. It was super dramatic.
I thought you guys were gone. Like, I was just like...
What do you mean by gone?
Well, they said the baby's heartbeat was 0, so no heartbeat means that the baby is, not alive anymore. I'm like, they would have to take him out and then resuscitate him. I thought it was like, that's what I thought was going down. And then for some reason, I was like, if it's an emergency C-section and it's not planned, that means something can happen to her too. So I was just like, and they're gone. A nurse comes in, she's like, okay, you have to go with them. I'm like, okay, what do I have to do? She's like, put on these scrubs. And she throws these scrubs at me. And she gave me 2 pairs of pants. So like, I put on the pants, then I couldn't go. And so I'm getting frustrated because I'm like, look, my wife got wheeled off to I don't know where, and you guys are holding me back because I don't have a shirt. So then they gave me a shirt, and then I came to where you were. The nurse took me in. I'm like, okay, everything's going to be fine. I'm telling myself in my head, everything's okay, everything's fine. You're being over dramatic. And then we get to this door, and she's like, you can't go beyond this point. And she just closed the door on me. Like, all the thoughts are running through my head, like, what happens? Like, am I going to be like a single dad? I'm like, are we going to lose the kid? I'm like, what's going to happen? Like, I'm freaking out. And I'm like ready to cry, and I'm like praying, and I'm like, what do I do? And then out of the elevator, there comes our midwife. And she's like, oh, I got your message. Because I had told her, before all this happened, I'm saying that, hey, like, oh, we're about ready to push. So she's here now. She's like, hey, what's going on? And I'm like, they took her away for a C-section. And like, this happened. She's like, okay. She's like, and like, what are you doing here? I'm like, they wouldn't let me go through. She's like, what? They wouldn't let you go through? So then this old lady goes, and she goes to the door that they won't let me through. She starts banging on it like, hey, you guys can't do this, you need to let him in. And then she after she's done banging on that, she goes and she walks down the hallway to the nurse station. She's about to go yell at them, whatever. And the nurse who closed the door on me in the first place opens the door, and she comes out. She's like, hey, you can come in now, everything's fine. So I'm just like, okay, I'm like, I'll take it.
Wait, I forgot to say, so when they wheeled me out, the doctor was with me, and that's actually the doctor that it was my mom's OB, so she was the doctor who birthed me. So as I'm like freaking out, I have no idea what's going on with my son, I asked them like, hey, is my baby okay? And they're like, we're gonna see when we do the surgery. And I was like, okay, I have no idea what that means, but I'm still like, hey, you were my doctor when I was in the hospital. She's like, really? She's like, who is your mom? And I told her who my mom was, and it was kind of in my head just like, how would you remember? Because it's been like 30 years. And she was just like, yeah, I remember her. You have brothers. And I was like, yeah, I do. It was really weird. But they gave me a spinal block because I already had the epidural. So they were like, basically they were like, if this works, then you can stay awake and everything's good. But if not, we're just going to knock you out and we're going to do the C-section. So they were, and I was asking them where you were, and they were like, oh, like, we're going to see if he's going to come in or not. So I'm like, okay, great. So now I'm by myself, I'm here, and they started doing the cut before you came in. I heard her say, I knew the baby was out, when I hear the doctor go, hi! And then another doctor goes, wow, that's a full head of hair. And that's how I knew that he was out. And then I turned around to the doctor who was beside me, or the nurse, and I was like, is my baby okay? And he was just like, do you not hear him yelling his head off? And I was like, yeah, I do.
So at that point I came in, and she's on the table, and I'm like, are you okay? And they have like the curtain there so I can't see anything. And like they're all like, all the doctors are working, and I'm like, are you okay? She's like, yeah, I'm fine. She's like, just check on the baby, make sure the baby's okay. And like, one of the nurses or the doctors there was like, oh, you can come around and, go see the baby. We're just, checking his APGAR and stuff. So I get up and I go around, and I just see like my wife's insides because I go behind the little curtain that they have. So like I go to see my baby, but I can't help but peek, and I just see her insides like everywhere. Like, oh, there's her like, I don't even know what. Like I
can't. What they say, you know each other inside out.
Yeah, I've seen the inside.
You've seen my inside.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I looked at the baby, and he was great, and he was happy, and I was so just like proud to see him, and it was really wonderful. I got to carry him over to Sana, and she saw him, she started crying, and then I started getting a little bit teary-eyed.
She's like, is that actually my baby? I actually couldn't believe it. Like, couldn't believe what he looked like or anything. I was like, oh my god.
We're not talking about you.
Yes.
We're not talking about
So
you.
this is our second baby.
Yeah, this is not the thing we're talking about.
I told you I was a little late on doing this video, like 3 years too late. He'll get his own video.
Yeah, get your own video. So you have your own
Yeah.
story. Trust me, that's a story too.
This is at 10:39 a.m. So between 10:30 when she put in the Pitocin and 10:39, it took them 9 minutes to do the C-section and get him out.
That was it. And then I was like, okay, so everything's good. And they're like, okay, you take the baby. And then she got wheeled off.
Yeah, so they took me to another room, and I kept trying to be like, can I stay with him? And they're like, no, you're not allowed to stay with him. You have to be in recovery. So they took me to this room, and the first question I asked them was, I asked them 2 questions. I said, can I have a midwife again? And the second question I asked them was, how many C-sections can you have? Because I feel like when I was younger, they told me, like, you can only have, like, 2 C-sections or something, right? And I was like, what if I want more than 2 kids? And they were like, you can have as many C-sections as you want. Yes? Well, that's about it, right?
That's pretty much it. I got, I got to go with the baby. I got to make sure everything was okay with him. I got to do some skin to skin with him. And then...
You gave him your finger.
I gave him my finger to suck on as he was waiting to get some breast milk, and all in all, it was really surreal. I wasn't even sure. I was like, what if she's not okay? And I'm like, what if everything? They wheeled her in about like an hour later, and she was a little bit out of it.
I was so your niece and nephew were there, and I saw them down the hall, and I was like, oh, so that's my niece and nephew. Hey! They were just like, look at me like.
They looked really embarrassed.
I don't know you.
You know what? It didn't end up being how we planned or expected it.
At all.
But, the end result is good. And obviously. It really helped us to learn that it's not just about knowing what you want, it's also about being prepared to deal with what you wouldn't and what you can't expect. Okay. I really appreciate this opportunity.
Alright, well, that's pretty much it. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next week. Bye!
Hey, buddy. It's for Mama, okay? Just
Always said I would know where to find peace. Always thought I'd be ready and strong enough, but sometimes I just felt I could give up. But you came and you changed my whole world now. I'm somewhere I've never been before. Now I see what life means. So unbelievable, and I don't wanna let it go. Something so beautiful, it's flowing down like a waterfall. I feel like you've always been forever a part of me. So unbelievable to finally be in love, somewhere I never thought I'd be. In my heart, in my head, it's so clear now. I'm so glad I've got nothing to fear now. I was lost and you rescued me somehow. I'm alive, I'm in love, you complete me. And I've never been here before. Now I see what life means. So unbelievable, and I don't wanna let it go. Something so beautiful, it's flowing down like a waterfall. I feel like you've always been forever a part of me. So unbelievable to finally be in love, somewhere I never thought I'd be. When I think of what I have and these chance I nearly lost, I can never but break down. so beautiful. It's flowing down like a waterfall. I feel like you've always been